Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty leagues, PPR leagues, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up? It's the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm their host, Ethan. It is going to be a great day today at home, at the house, at the crib. You know what's going on. We're all going through it. Each day is like a new mini challenge for me. Trying to find something new to do, something that makes me feel like I'm being just a tiny bit more productive than the last day. And sometimes you don't even need to be productive. Productivity doesn't always have to be on go 24/7. But I still find times to do different things. I just found an app the other day that it's not an app. It's actually a promo code for Fender. That this is not a promoted thing. But I used to play bass guitar quite a bit in my youth, and I wanted to try and get back in it, and I was browsing around Reddit, because I do that quite a bit, and there was this promo code being shifted around through threads about the company Fender that makes guitars. They end up having a 3-month tutorial for guitars for beginners and people trying to come back into it during this pandemic. So I'm about to get it in. I'm about to get active. I'm about to pick up the bass, dust it off, get it all tuned up, and get right into it. But speaking of tuning up, we got a lot of things to tune into for this podcast. So first thing on the agenda is this Cam Newton thing. So a lot of people are kind of shifted on the stances of Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers in general, because some people believe that they needed to move on, and I could agree with that to a certain extent. I believe that they should have moved on, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like Cam wanted to move on, and that's a business decision. But I also feel like Cam Newton might be getting the short end of the stick here, and he wasn't given proper time to be able to prove himself in the market, or really market himself at all and maybe you can put this on towards because the world is in a global pandemic that we haven't seen before, but this is quite the reach. That to say that Cam Newton should not be on an NFL team. Not to say that he won't be, but this is getting kind of interesting how this is going. We're seeing people like Jameis Winston, Cam Newton. When Cam is healthy, he's good. And if you look at his numbers, his passing numbers don't look that great, especially his interception and touchdown splits. But if you combine that with his rushing numbers and rushing TDs, he's been one of the most productive quarterbacks we've had in the last few years. Not to mention, when he plays 16 games since 2013, the Carolina Panthers have only been 11-5. So it's kind of weird. They kind of go back and forth. So 2013 they're 12-4. And then 2014, they're 5-8. Cam only played 14 games then, and he had He had 18 TDs to 12 interceptions. I believe this was the year Cam literally had no help in the wide receiver group, and it just didn't turn out to be as good as you would like them to be. Then 2015 came around. 15-1. That was the Super Bowl season. He ended up with 35 passing touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Then we have his 2016 season, 6-8, 19-14, 2017, 11-5, 22-16, and then, of course, the last 2 years, he played 14 games in 2018, 24-13, which is the numbers don't say it all for that season because he really did struggle quite a bit, but he had his highest completion percentage that year, interestingly enough, but Cam Newton did not play but 2 games in 2019. All right, so that's just his passing numbers. Of course, his rushing numbers are kind of interesting too, just because of the games played. But he's one of the top. He has the most rushing touchdowns by a large margin for a quarterback in NFL history. So just to put that in perspective, he has 58 of them. 58. Now, he got a large chunk in the beginning of his career with 14, and then in 2015 he had 10. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I think he belongs on an NFL team, and I think he should be able to find a new start somewhere. Where is it going to be? The Chargers have been very adamant saying that Tyrod Taylor is going to be their guy going into the season. I don't believe Ron Rivera wants to be with Cam Newton again for his new refresh after the Panthers essentially started letting everybody go. And they do this thing where when they let somebody go, the stories that start coming about are how players are not feeling like they were given a fair shot, like the Greg Olsen thing. Greg Olsen didn't want to go, apparently, according to him. Cam didn't want to go, according to him. They essentially called Steve Smith a thug years ago when they let him go. It was just not a good... They never have really quality send-offs, you know? Of course, their very infamous linebacker he retired, but he did not... It didn't seem like there was any animosity, but he did retire. So they're just losing this era of time where all these players were very fondly remembered and coaches were fondly remembered on the Panthers. So they're obviously doing a reset, a retooling. And that's just it. The crazy thing is when you look at that trade for Kyle Allen that the Redskins did for a 5th-round pick, you could argue that the Redskins didn't need to do the 5th-round pick, but you got to remember that Ron Rivera is there. And unless there was no animosity, I don't know if there's animosity between Ron Rivera and Cam Newton, but I don't think he wants to be with Cam Newton in a refresh start. That just doesn't sound like something he would want to try and fit into his new system, new offense. I don't know where there's many starting positions left for Cam Newton. You could argue that the Patriots are still available, but the Patriots don't seem to have any interest in Cam Newton. As with Jameis Winston, the quarterback market kind of went up in flames. As soon as Tom Brady signed, everybody just started getting eaten up. They went and got Teddy Bridgewater for Carolina. Tampa Bay went and got their quarterback. Miami is quite noted to be going for Tua Tagovailoa in the draft. Of course, Bengals, they're quite noted that they're going to draft Joe Burrow. The Chargers were in Brady talks. They didn't get Brady, so now they're just going to sit it out and draft while they have Tyrod Taylor be the bridge guy. Then we look at Indianapolis Colts, who were in Phillip Rivers talks. They get Phillip Rivers, and Jacoby ends up being a backup. There's probably more chance of Jacoby getting a job somewhere else than Cam Newton, and that's really troubling to me. You know, Cam Newton proved he can play in this league at a high level, and when healthy, he is a supreme physical athlete in the NFL. But at the end of the day, I don't know if there's any good roster spots for him. You can't say Nick Foles ends up in Jacksonville. Maybe Jacksonville takes a flyer on Cam Newton. Maybe. I'm sorry. Nick Foles ends up on the Bears from Jacksonville. And maybe Jacksonville decides that this is the time, right? Maybe we should jump on ship. But they have Gardner Minshew, and they're probably going to roll with him. And I don't think they want to make Cam a backup and have the infamous quarterback controversy that's been going around for years and years and years in different places. It's just a tough environment. But I feel for Cam quite a bit. I think he's getting a bad rep. I think Jameis is getting a bad end to stick to. He's too young. He belongs in the league, and he should be able to find a job. And it's going to be tough when you have to see both of them potentially take 1-year deals somewhere and essentially try and prove themselves or sit on the bench and just kind of wait it out for a year. But that just seems to be the direction of where the league is seeing their value at. But we're going to take another break and we're going to talk about some more quarterback.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we have the Ryan Tannehill signing. We have Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay. Jarrett Stidham in for the Patriots supposedly, but we don't know for sure. Miami's drafting. Chargers are drafting. Everybody is very young at a lot of different positions in their quarterbacking career. The Raiders are kind of a question mark as far as what they're going to do, but it seems like the safe move for them is to just wait it out with the quarterback they already have. And here we are with the Bengals about to draft the number 1 overall pick, supposedly Joe Burrow. And they were looking for trades for Andy Dalton because they would rather respect him that way, I suppose, and wait it out. But the Bengals are open now to keeping Andy Dalton on the roster. Reported by Kevin Patra. The quarterback chairs have moved around, right? The quarterback carousel has been all around and it's finally reached its stopping point. There's no spots. There's nowhere to fill. There's a lot of starters on the market right now. So Andy Dalton, James Winston, Cam Newton, to name 3. So what is going to happen? Because they don't want to just sit on all of this, but at the same time, there's nobody to wheel and deal with this. Now, maybe when the season starts and potentially things happen, people may not be working out, or they want to blow it up, or they want to salvage a season. Maybe something can happen. But it doesn't seem like anybody's any buyers into Andy Dalton. Which, does that say more about Andy Dalton or does that say more about the market? I think it says a little bit about both. Since then, we have some quarterbacks that were moved, like I said earlier. So Chicago traded for Nick Foles. The Buccaneers signed Tom Brady. Panthers added Teddy Bridgewater to the Chargers. Insist they're rolling on Tyrod, but they're going to draft a rookie. I would put a lot of money on it. Patriots signed Brian Hoyer to compete with Jarrett Stidham. This is the one that kind of rubs me in a weird way, is saying that this smells like something smelly, like a fish. It smells like a fish to me. stinks. This is a stinky move. I think that the Patriots are about to do something in the draft or later on in free agency that we just don't expect. I just can't believe that Jarrett Stidham is going to be the guy. And I can't. Brian Hoyer has been in the league for too long. Not to say I believe he should retire, but this for too long to be the idea that it is to compete with Jarrett Stidham. That's the one. This is the play. I really think the Patriots were not. They were prepared to move on from Tom, but they did not prep well enough. I don't think they never want to pay anybody. They don't really believe that any move that they make outside of wide receivers are bad, because it's been notorious that they don't get wide receivers very well except for Randy Moss. And they don't treat their players on exit very well. And Tom Brady had enough, seems like. There's been a lot of pieces written about this, but Tom Brady had enough and he was ready to go. So now he's in Tampa. The Patriots essentially are trying to retool. They lose a lot of defensive players as well. Some to Miami, some to other places. The division in itself is getting quite tough, as the Jets seem to try to retool at some point. Miami's definitely retooling, and they are looking a little bit more formidable, especially after the way they ended last season. Maybe that was an omen. That loss to Miami was the beginning of the end. Legitimately. I don't know. If they beat Miami and they get their bye, do you think that they would end up, Brady would end up leaving, or this was already a done deal? It might have already been a done deal, because there was a lot of rumblings, a lot of discomfort with Brady and the Pats, in the Pats, real, like, early on, especially during Deflategate, there was a lot of stuff. He didn't seem like he wanted to be defended more, and they just gave up on him and let him take the penalty when he really wanted to fight it. But beyond that, this is about Bengals and Andy Dalton. You're sitting on this guy. He eats a lot of he eats a lot of money, and this isn't like the NBA where you could possibly use him and you just salary dump him. This is more of a fit and need thing, supply and demand. There's just a lot of quarterbacks, or a lot of teams are trying to ride it out with their young guys before they just jump ship and get one of these individuals. And I've never seen the quarterback market quite like this. It's quite strange to me, and I don't know what to say about it, to be honest. Nobody's running a 2 quarterback setup in the NFL. It'd be interesting if they tried to. Like, they play one quarterback for certain reason, and they play another for different reasons. Now, I guess you can technically say the New Orleans Saints, but in reality, is that true? I don't know. I just feel like Taysom was not a quarterback for majority of his playing time on New Orleans, especially when he was getting more use. He was the Swiss Army knife guy, but the reason why it was so interesting was because he came in as a quarterback. But he's fast and he can run the ball and he plays hard. But we all know at the end of the day, the jury's still out of if he can play quarterback at an NFL level, because most times guys are scouting him as a runner that knows that he can pass, and he doesn't throw that many passes during the regular season or in the season in general. He doesn't throw many passes. Usually it's a design play for him to run or to catch out of the tight end spot or to block or to do whatever, but passing is just not something that they do often, probably to make sure that teams don't overplay the pass too much, because he's an athlete, plays hard, but Taysom Hill is not a shifty guy, so he's not going to make you miss. They're just going to contain him and stop him at some point. So unless he starts throwing a plethora of skill out in the air, it's not going to look as if you're seeing Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton together playing side by side and getting active out there. So yeah, there's just not a lot of space and not a lot of room for quarterbacks. the table is full. So now it's a waiting game. And I don't really know how waiting games work in the NFL for quarterbacks. Most times people are already on a bench and their contract runs up and they find somewhere else or they trade for them. But I guess maybe we should talk to Nick Foles. Maybe I should get in contact with Nick Foles. He seems to know his way to get on a new team all the time. Maybe Cam Newton should reach out and see what he says, or maybe Jameis should look to him, because this is crazy. Jameis threw for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. Granted, 30 interceptions, but any other year he gets another shot somewhere, I believe. That's the thing. Any other year these guys get a job, a starting job rather, because I would assume that they could get a backup job if they wanted it, right? They would have to take a lot less money than they're used to, and I don't think any of them want to do that. I wouldn't want to do that if I knew that I was capable of starter quality, capable of starter money. And I know Jameis really wanted a decent payday. At least he wanted the Tannehill. I know that's for sure. Everybody involved in this wants a little bit of that Tannehill deal. Andy Dalton is just trying to find a new place to be, I would assume, because the Bengals gave up on him. They're going to part ways. Or are they? Because now he can't really go anywhere, because nobody is going to trade for an expensive quarterback to sit on their bench and do nothing. Read the charts, talk with the headset on. Maybe his best way of being around is to help Joe Burrow be a better quarterback and just be a team guy. That's the reason why they were looking to trade him in the first place, respectfully at least, was because he was so much for the team and he understood what was going on. But we're going to go ahead and take another break, and we're going to get back into the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
The Saints have been active this offseason quite much. They had to let go of Teddy Bridgewater, had to let him walk. They couldn't afford him, but they should be getting a third-round compensation pick from that eventually. They ended up getting Emmanuel Sanders. They got Malcolm Jenkins back. They're making a lot of different moves. They had to let go of Von Bell, but they're trying to make logical steps and logical moves to help them aid Drew Brees, who signed a 2-year deal to be back with the Saints in playoff contention and Super Bowl contention, to be more fitting. Now, before Drew Brees came back, a lot of people were talking about what's going to happen with Teddy Bridgewater, what's going to happen with Taysom Hill, and a lot of talk was about Taysom Hill potentially being the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints' future. I never really agreed with that, but Drew Brees ended up re-signing, so there it was. There was a lot of talk. People were being outlandish, ridiculous, hyperboles about he could be the next Lamar Jackson. That's just ridiculous. Lamar Jackson was a top 3, and he wasn't 2 or 3 when he played in college, athlete on the football field, a dynamic Heisman Trophy winner, by far the quickest guy on the field, the most explosive guy on the field since he was probably 10 is just not. It's just not a good comparison. Taysom Hill, and he can throw the ball better. Taysom Hill is not as good of a quarterback as Lamar, and it just was a bad take. Anyway, Taysom Hill he has a tender on him first round, and I don't think anybody's going to be biting on that at all. This is a good move by the Saints. They knew no one's going to bite on a Taysom Hill pick, especially if it's for a first rounder. Nobody wants to do that, so they'll get to keep him and pay him eventually. But he is quarterback number 2 now on the depth chart, per Sean Payton, who also is recovering quite well from being tested positive with COVID-19 last week. Said he's feeling a lot better. But he had an interview on WWL radio. He said that Hill will go up into the 2020 season as the team's backup quarterback. He's earned that opportunity via the Athletics' Jeff Duncan. He added that Hill's role as the Saints' utility player of sorts would not be altered, and that another quarterback would have to be added with Teddy Bridgewater signing NFC South rival Panthers. So, what that tells me as a football fan, as a guy who follows the sport pretty well, is that the Saints are looking for quarterback 3. And not just any quarterback 3. They're probably looking for the replacement. It starts now. The replacement for Drew starts now. Because I just have a hard time. I have a very difficult time believing that if they think Taysom was this good, I really don't think Drew Brees would want to come back. Or they wouldn't. They respect Drew Brees, of course. This is not like a Patriots situation where they're so cutthroat that they'll do anything to avoid paying the tax on a guy that they feel is kind of washed and outdated. So I don't think the Saints would do that, but I would have to assume that somewhere down the line they have to believe Taysom could be the guy. And I'm not too convinced that they think that. And we might see something in the draft that reflects this thought, because I have a strong feeling that they're going to take a quarterback that they've probably been watching, probably been scouting for a little bit, and they're going to take him late in the rounds, or I don't think they're going to jump for a quarterback. They have other needs to fill. But if there's one that falls in their lap and they like it, and maybe he's a 4th rounder, they're going to take a shot. Now, I've been on several podcasts stating about my support for anybody who's looking into drafting Jalen Hurts. I'm just throwing that one out there again, that Jalen Hurts will probably be available for the Saints in those later rounds, and he kind of fits that archetype that they seem to be liking inside of Taysom Hill, who can do a little bit of everything, really athletic, and I would argue, and it's not even an argument, I feel that Jalen Hurts is a better passer right now than Taysom Hill has displayed thus far in his football career. So just to put that out there in the atmosphere, I'd be in full on support of the move. I'd be very happy. There's a lot of Alabama Saints fans, Saints fanatics out there. They merge because Alabama doesn't have a pro team. So a lot of people either root for the Saints or some team in Texas. So I just have to believe that the Saints are looking for someone else. And the quarterback market in free agency right now is a little bit iffy. You don't want to bring someone like Cam Newton in. You can't. It's going to cause some weird controversy. You don't want to bring some guy like Jameis. It's going to be weird. It's going to cause a big controversy. So I don't really get the notion that they're just going to ride with 2 quarterbacks. They have to get the third, and because Taysom is a guy who could potentially injure himself quite easily because he runs so much. They use him in so many different packages and so many different ways that in reality he is a liability to himself. to be the number 2 quarterback. And if Drew Brees were to go down again, unfortunately, I don't think it would happen. It's very rare. But if he did, Taysom has to be the guy to be able to fill that position. So, and if Taysom is still doing Taysom things, and we haven't seen anything to believe that Taysom is an injury-prone guy, but they got to have somebody for him that they believe in that could help this offense continue to do what it does. And I don't think the quarterbacks on this market for the right price are going to be able to do that. So I think they're going to look into the draft, find a guy that they can mold into the future. And the future is somebody who can maneuver outside the pocket and throw the football and also do stuff with his legs, because that's where the league is going toward. You don't have to be a breakout speedster like Lamar Jackson, but you have to be able to move out of the pocket. You have to have some mobility. Russell Wilson is probably the best prototype to look at when it comes to what the league what you want in your league, because he is the second best quarterback in the league behind Patrick Mahomes, and that's just bar none. It's Patrick Mahomes, then Russell Wilson. And I feel like Patrick Mahomes is a little bit of a weird guy to say that you want, because you don't get too many Patrick Mahomes. You don't get a lot of Russell Wilsons either, but there's been Russell Wilsons in the draft before. As you see, Kyler Murray is a Russell Wilson type, in my opinion. And you're getting guys with all this athleticism, all this movability coming in. So when I look at somebody like a Jalen Hurts, I'm like, okay, this guy, he has a lot of intangibles. I think he's a really good character guy. And he fits what the Saints have tried to do with Taysom since he's came about, as trying to be more of a backfield guy rather than special teams and gunning during punts. I don't think they're figuring a quarterback to do that again, but they want a quarterback who can be dynamic, so that way Sean Payton can get really, really creative with his offense and do more innovative stuff that the Saints have been known to do for many years, as being an offensive innovator and a scoring machine juggernaut. Sean Payton, as an offensive mind, is well known into the football verse. So this is just a common evolution into that. It would be quite interesting to see what they do, and just quarterbacks in general. It's quite interesting to see where the league will take it, because we still have some guys who can't move as well in the league still, and they're getting slowly phased out. And technically, we're about to draft a guy who he can move a little bit. That's what you need, somebody who can move a little bit, but he's not a runner per se. But of course, Tua is a guy who's not as fast, but he can move quick on his feet when healthy. And that's just something that a lot of guys are taking into account now. All right, so let's take another break and we'll get back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So Redskins are all up in the news now because of this Kyle Allen trade that they've done. And Ron Rivera is speaking up about it because it's got people questioning what exactly he believes is going on inside his own camp and his own front office. So here we go. Questions about Washington Redskins' plans as quarterback have swirled this offseason, from potential drafting a quarterback at the number 2 overall pick to adding a veteran to compete with Dwayne Haskins. All options have seemed on the table. So, of course, you know that head coach Ron Rivera was the head coach previously for the Carolina Panthers, and now he is the head coach of the Washington Redskins after being fired. Now, here we have a interesting trade because it seems like Kyle Allen might be Ron Rivera's guy. I would imagine that he wouldn't trade for him if he didn't like him. So here we are. Here we go. This is the similar. I know a lot of Washington fans have to be feeling like this feels familiar. A coach wants his guy, and potentially Dan Snyder has his guy. Who's gonna win it out? Who's gonna be the guy that ends up? Who's gonna be the guy that ends up doing the best thing for the team? You would have to say Haskins right now because we haven't seen enough to really claim that he is not any good, but we have seen enough to know that he isn't good right now. And we know Kyle Allen had some highs and had a few highs, really, not too many. Had a few and a decent amount of lows last season. So, but they're both young. Kyle Allen has a pretty good arm. Ron Rivera says he understands the game, understands how we do things, and he figures things out on the fly. So it's just an interesting pickup. It's going to shake some things up. It's going to help Haskins compete, so to speak, as some people think that's what this is for. And I believe also it's for Haskins to compete, but it's also a contingency plan. If Haskins stinks, they got to have somebody they believe in. Ron Rivera usually likes to bring in his guys. Ron Rivera likes his guys, and he likes guys that can buy into his system. And I guess Kyle Allen bought into what Ron Rivera was selling, and then Ron Rivera got shipped out of there. So it's only natural that the Carolina Panthers look at this and say, okay, we can get some value for him. You know, Ron Rivera and the Carolina Panthers ended up parting ways, but it seemed to be in a respectful manner, I suppose. It didn't look like they threw him out to dry, so they can still do business. And maybe it wasn't even them doing business. Maybe it was a GM to GM conversation. The weird thing is Cam Newton was cut by Carolina this week. And not to say that Cam Newton should have sat as a backup behind Dwayne Haskins. That's ridiculous. That's probably why it didn't happen. But it's just interesting to see that they gave up a 5th-round pick for our guy here, and Cam Newton got nothing. So, and not only Cam Newton would you never cost anything for Cam Newton essentially. Well, it would cost a little bit of money, but for what you gave up in a pick that's pretty valuable these days in the 5th round, you can find some good guys. That was a pretty hefty deal for Kyle Allen, in my opinion, where you could have kept the pick and still have a guy. So it's coming into an interesting point now because we're in the second wave of free agency, and we had to look at all these teams and see what they're about to do. And Washington has had this offseason, Washington has had a lot of different things come out of their camp, especially during the draft combine, and now into free agency, we're seeing more and more of what teams' plans are and what they want to accomplish. And what it looks to me, Carolina wants to fully rebrand itself. Carolina wants to fully rebrand itself, but this is about the Redskins. The Redskins are trying to figure out what exactly is their brand. And Ron Rivera is a guy who is well known for having a certain style of football be played, a certain style of leadership to be exuded, and ability to galvanize a lot of people under one idea. That's what he's known for. That's what got him to the Super Bowl. He didn't win it, but it got him there, and people have respected him ever since. And he's one of the most respected coaches in the National Football League. So the first things first is if you're not behind him as a player, you don't get to play. You're not going to get to play. He's definitely a guy that plays people who respect the craft, who respect the commitment to the game, and it's not always about you. And maybe that's why him and Cam didn't work out, at least in some seasons. There was some butting heads at times over the years, and it wasn't always peaches and cream with Cam Newton, but at the end of the day, they ended up being able to work together to do some things and be able to move on. But Rivera's a big family guy. He looks at this situation, I would assume, with the idea of that I'm going to mold this team into what I think gives it its best chance to win. And he doesn't know of its best chances with Haskins, so he has to figure something else out in the meantime, because I don't think they want to draft another quarterback and have a three-way race to who's going to be the starter. I don't think they're going to draft Tua, and I don't believe they're going to, unless the Dolphins decide to trade up for him to secure it. That still doesn't mean that they're going to do that, because if they're looking to get the best defensive player in the draft right now, at least projectedly, in Chase Young, there's just no way that they're going to let the opportunity go by and go back in the draft to let the number 3 person potentially grab him as well. So there's a lot of different strategies that can be taken here. You could argue that there's been a lot of smoke screens thrown out there to try and bait a trade, and now the Redskins are just trading everybody and acquiring certain assets, losing assets. They're doing a lot of buying and selling, but nothing really is making a big splash as you would hope as a Redskins fan. But fear not, because I do believe that the Redskins are just going to play this by the book, draft Chase Young, and build up for the future, as they can still compete in this football league. And I think if they find their quarterback, they can have a really good team. But that's a lot of teams right now. If anybody could find a quarterback, they could be a really good team. If the Jets had Sam Darnold for majority of the season instead when he got mono, they might make the playoffs. If Miami gets a good quarterback in Tua and their roster stays healthy, they could be a good team. There's a lot of good talent around this NFL league and football league that parity exists in a sense. The NFL is a very competitive league. All it takes is just one change, one offseason to really bring back somebody's team into prominence, into talking. It's really hard to be bad for a very long time, but in relation to sports time, at least. For example, the Knicks have been bad for decades. The Patriots were one of the laughingstocks of the league for many, many years until they turned it around, and now they're one of the most storied franchises ever to play, ever to be talked about. But the NFL, it kind of flows and sways around. I can't speak today. So look at the AFC East. AFC East has been a cakewalk, so to speak, for years, pretty much since 2009. Their only team that really challenged them was the Jets when they went to the AFC Championship game. Other than that, that was it. There hasn't been a hard challenge for the Patriots ever since. And it's very interesting to see now that we'll get something. But I know I fell off a little off track on there, but we're going to take another break and we're going to get into some more free agency talk.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Money. Here comes the money. Money. That's one of my favorite theme songs I've ever heard in wrestling. Love that. But it's money time, as in we still have some NFL news to talk about as far as the money is concerned. It's the free agency wave 2, so to speak. Number one, let's talk about some Cowboys. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys reopened long-term contract deals talks. It wasn't that long ago, 10 days ago, that the Cowboys were forced to use their franchise tag to keep Dak Prescott from going to the free market. And now they're reopening conversations for a long-term deal. Most contracts take some degree of time, but this one should be afforded a larger amount of it. Prescott's new deal could reset the quarterback market just before Patrick Mahomes' upcoming contract shatters our existing frame of understanding, and it's about more than just the annual salary or guaranteed compensation. So, Amari Cooper just signed a 5-year, $100 million deal, and securing their quarterback in a similar size window of time would be very good. Sure, they lost Byron Jones and Robert Quinn, but not every key player can be retained. That's just how the business works. So, the contract is being alluded to being about far more than average dollars per year, and reiterated that positive nature of the two sides reopening talks. And if you know anything about the Cowboys, they are generally willing to spend the money. They definitely look to spend the money. All right. So, in more news, we have some interesting signings relative to how interesting it can be in a lockdown situation here. But Ndamukong Suh signs a 1-year deal to go back to the Buccaneers, which is awesome for the Buccaneers. He's still able to play at a good high level, you know. It's not as what he used to be in his prime on the Lions, but he's a guy that can still do some things, still plug up some holes, and really, really get you going in the best way possible. He makes things easier for everybody else. So the veteran tackle is going to make $8 million, and he was a part of the number one rushing defense of 2019. And with Tom Brady's arrival, the Buccaneers' approach has suddenly shifted in dramatic fashion. So they are now, instead of looking for playoff hopefuls, they're looking, now everything's about Super Bowls, essentially. So Ndamukong Suh will get to return to play with previous defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, who got the most out of his rising defense in the second half of 2019, and he won't have to worry about finding a new place to live. Sweet deal for him. So, Ndamukong back in Tampa Bay. I'm excited for that one. Here we go. We have some more D-line with Dontari Poe. Dallas Cowboys and defensive tackle Dontari Poe have agreed basic terms on the deal to help bolster the loss, I believe, of multiple defensive players that the Cowboys have lost over the year in order to probably sign Dak Prescott. So Poe has become the second former Panther to leave Carolina for Dallas, joining Gerald McCoy with the Cowboys after McCoy spent the 2019 season in Charlotte. After losing Robert Quinn, this makes a lot of sense, and we're not too sure what the deal is monetarily, but it's got to be something interesting for a guy who is a veteran, who knows how to play the role, and can get behind whatever the coach is going to do. We have some Chris Harris news. Chargers signed me for more versatility. So Chris Harris was prepared to sign with the Eagles or Saints when the Chargers surprised him with an offer. So that's interesting. I did not know he was looking at the Saints to sign. But the Chargers, in their quest for their first world title, snagged one of the best cornerbacks on the market, and they said that they'd use him as more versatility. They kind of came out of nowhere at the end. He was looking at the Saints or the Eagles, and then they popped out of nowhere, and I thought it would be even better fit for me. I think he probably liked the weather situation, because I don't think Philadelphia or New Orleans are the best places to live if you like good weather. Personally, he knows where he stands in Los Angeles. The same can't be said for quarterback Tyrod Taylor, as I would assume that they're still looking to draft a young guy at the quarterback position that could be the quarterback for many years to come. All right, so that's a little bit more free agency news. We're going to end it off by talking a little bit about the draft, because the draft is technically canceled, essentially, for the public to go to. The public can't go to it. It will be an online event. The NFL, like the rest of the world, has uncharted territory during this current COVID-19 pandemic, as it affects everybody around the world. And the draft, though it's still going to go on, it's just going to take place in a much different format, with social distancing among the most important measures everyone can take in mitigating the spread of COVID-19. So NFL has been reaching out to top prospects this week to participate in the draft set for April 23rd through 25th. And NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport reported that the letters to agents obtained by the NFL media, the league said, is working on a virtual solution that will incorporate prospects in the broadcast from their locations. So this is what I thought when I talked with Bryce last week, is that they'll probably do some sort of weird FaceTime thing, some sort of live cam, like Instagram Live or something, live streaming different players' reactions or different things like that. But for me, it's still going to feel weird, because let's say a player dials in, FaceTimes in, right? And that player has a bunch of family members together during a time where we're not supposed to be together. Imagine the backlash. It's not, we've seen how NFL teams can react when they see something on Instagram or on television or online from a player that just isn't smart. And we know how that works in their drafts. Like, we saw what happened to infamously, who now does not play on Miami Dolphins, but Laremy Tunsil for the Texans. He was caught with a gas mask, and it was not very recent when this happened. It was from months ago, before the draft came about, and the surface right during the draft, and he fell quite a few spots in the draft and lost out on some dollars. And a lot of teams lost out on a pretty good tackle in this NFL league, all because of video surface. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's kind of the worst case scenario for a player or for a team looking to draft somebody, but it's just something to think about, you know? You're putting in new elements because you have no choice, and you have no idea how it's going to work, and we don't even know how the draft is going to be entertaining now. They had all this stuff building up. They had a boat coming. It was crazy what the draft was going to look like this coming year, and now it will have to be, I guess, done at a later time, because I believe the draft moves from location to location now instead of having it in one place. So it's become more of a event. The NFL is coming to town, the draft's coming to town, sort of thing. So it's going to be quite something to see when we get to it. Hopefully the environment around the world and politics aside would be better. Not to say that it's going to change how the NFL is going to handle this, but I would hope that you can have a bit more people around each other by April, but it's not looking that way for right now. It's definitely looking like we're going to be social distancing for at least till May. May seems like the next milestone to make it and check up and see what life is going to be like after that point. But I'm still going to be tuning into the draft just like every other football fanatic, every football fan does, just to see where guys go, see which GMs make smart moves, which GMs, do the Bill O'Brien special on us in live form. I'm interested to see how people handle the war room situations, if they're going to have live stream war rooms, or if they're going to have people live doing FaceTiming for the war room because they can't be together. It's going to be a whole lot of different stuff going on. But we're going to take our final break, and then we're getting to our last segment of the day.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, I wanted to finish this week's podcast on a little bit more talk about fantasy, as there hasn't been too much to talk about fantasy as we're still into free agency and still trying to figure some things out. So what a better way to end a fantasy football podcast than to talk about some fantasy elements. And I'm just going to have a little bit of fun with this. But I was thinking about, what guys do you not want to invite into your fantasy football league? So this is for me thinking about how I'm starting a league and I'm doing this little walkthrough. And I'm trying to think of guys I don't want to invite and guys I do want to invite and able to join the fantasy league and really get involved with what we got going on here. So I have four archetypes, 4 people that you don't want in your league typically because they can be detrimental to the success of retaining said people, and you're going to go into a cycle of having to replace people year in, year out, instead of having a group of solid individuals that will want to come in and play fantasy football and enjoy the riches, the spoils of victory, and the pain of defeat. So the first is the guy who watches but doesn't really care. What I mean by that is he watches the game of football. He watches football, watches the NFL, but he doesn't really care enough about details of the NFL in order for him to be successful in fantasy long term, and he eventually will realize that it's not worth his time. So, for example, he may watch his local teams, he may watch all the local channels, like the local channels of CBS, the Fox. He's just watching games, so he knows records, he knows some star players, he knows which teams are bad due to records, and he'll just watch games. Any game that's on, he'll turn it on and watch, but he's probably not watching heavily. He's not looking at guys who could potentially be sleepers on waiver wires. He's not looking for guys that he could think about may have some draft potential in the next season. He's just watching the games to see who wins and loses, and that's it. Those type of guys will not last in fantasy because at the end of the day, there's a lot of names you have to keep up with, and you got to really know football. You got to know players' names. Personnel on different teams is something really big in sports, fantasy betting, all that sort of stuff. And if you don't know personnel, you're playing behind the 8 ball. And when a guy is playing behind the 8 ball and he's smart enough to realize that, hey, I just put $50 in this pot and I have no idea who these players are these guys are drafting. I just know Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and I just know quarterbacks. You're not going to do too well. You're going to have no idea that Devontae Parker had a pretty good end of the season last year and you should look to get him at some point in your draft. Or you don't have a draft strategy because you don't know a lot of these guys. So you don't know the sleepers. You don't know the guys who are kind of mid-rounders. You don't know the guys who should be taken in your top picks. You don't know why somebody like Austin Eckler, who didn't sign a mega deal, is one of the better pickups you can pick in fantasy. It's just not something that they're going to know about because they don't really watch the NFL really extensively outside of just wins and losses. Number 2, the money guy. You don't want to get involved with the money guy. By money guy, I mean you don't want to get involved with a guy who only sees the potential earnings from the fantasy if he wins, and that's all he cares about. Because if he doesn't care about actually playing fantasy, at this point, whatever happens with him, so if he doesn't win outright in the first few weeks and his season essentially has tanked, by week 7, he's out of there. He's done because he realizes that the gamble didn't pay off. he doesn't really care that much about fantasy. He doesn't want to try and win, doesn't want to try and better his record because he knows that he's lost and he'll have a bad experience and he won't do it again. And it's just simple as that. Those type of guys kind of want to avoid because all they care about is potential earnings. And if that's the case, go gamble. Don't play fantasy if you're into immediate money payouts and stuff like that. Just go gamble. It's a better chance for you and it's less time commitment. Or do daily fantasy. Don't do a year-long league because that's just not, you're wasting everybody else's time because you're really not into it for the sport, just for the principle of playing the game. I played fantasy football for free for years, so I love doing it. It's what reminds me we're in the fall. It reminds me of what I have something to look forward to every week for a few months. It's awesome. I love it. And if you don't, and you're just in it to make, a little bit side money or, have a long-term thing to deal with, and you're not into the actual sport of fantasy football or actual game of it, you're just not going to enjoy yourself and you're going to bounce out and have to force somebody to find another guy to take your team. A similar option here is the hit it and quit it guy. So this is the guy who is, oh yeah, I'm into fantasy. I like doing that, or I played it a few times. And what will happen is he isn't all the way into it. And he'll either forget to set his lineups, or he'll get in your draft and he'll be really excited. He'll draft a pretty decent team, and all of a sudden, he loses interest. And he moves to something else, and he just stops changing his lineup, stops updating, doesn't look on waivers. When you try to go for him for a trade, it takes him 5 days to respond to said trade request, and by then you don't care anymore. And he's just going, either his team is winning by miracle, or he's at the bottom of the league because half his team are on bye weeks because he just stopped caring. You don't want that in your league. The hit it and quit it guy is a detriment to all things fantasy, and a lot of guys who play in your league will be mad because at some point you're going to see him as an easy win, and then just when you think that's going to happen, he's going to come back like Flash Pants in the 80s. He's going to come back and win a game because his team is actually pretty decent if he cared enough, and you're going to be mad because the last 4 people got a free easy win, and you were not able to capitalize on said potential. The last guy, before I wrap this up, is the grinder. The grinder is the guy who works 4 different jobs or has to do all this, that, and the third around his everyday life and doesn't have potentially time to watch football or do leisure activities like play fantasy football on the weekends. Maybe he cuts grass or has a landscaping business on the side and also cuts hair during the week, and then does all this, that, and the third to make some money and really, really push his overall income to a different level. Or maybe he's just busy, he has a lot of hobbies, and he wants to be able to do all of them all the time. And fantasy football, believe it or not, does take a bit of time because you have to keep up with the news cycle, you have to keep up with players, you have to watch different moves, and got to be involved 24/7, at least passively. Not actively, but you have to know things passively in order to really be successful. And if you don't have time to at least be passively involved with sports or with football, then it's going to be a tough time for you. Like, you're just going to end up being a fan of the sport and not be able to really be successful. So you're going to think, well, I don't really have time to try my best at this, so I'm going to have to drop it because I want to be able to take my son to soccer practice while I practice the ukulele. All right, that one was a little bit off base, but you get my point here. So those are the four types of people you don't want. So hopefully you guys don't have any of those type of people in your league because that's going to just make life so much tougher for you at the end of the day. So that's it. That's the Fantasy Football Podcast for the GSMC. Thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to rate and review us. And please, please, please follow us on our social media as we try to update on all different things. Try to tweet fun stuff. We do polls. We do questionnaires. Try and find us out at GSMC _FFB. That is our Twitter handle. So ask us anything. Answer our polls. Get active. We're trying to engage with you guys on a different level during all of this social distancing. So let's engage through social media. But this has been a great day. I hope for everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful week. And stay inside, stay safe, wash your hands, and practice social distancing. Thank you, and see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.